My name is Audrey. I am a mother, I'm a wife, and I'm a Christ follower. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. I was born and raised in the Nashville area. I work for Arise Kingdom Ministries. I've been on the Speak Life project for the last year, and I have a passion for helping women who are in the post-abortive, pre-abortion cycle, who maybe are still deciding if they are going to parent and just filling out their parenting options. God called me to help women after we had gone through the adoption process. We have a very open adoption with our daughter's birth mother, and just seeing that she had people in her life while she was pregnant that were loving and caring for her while she was placing her child for adoption really sparked an interest in just knowing how to love and care for women that are in that process. About 4 years ago, God gave me a series of dreams. In the first dream, a young woman was coming to me and asking me, or she was telling me that she was pregnant and that she couldn't keep the baby. When she told me that, my first initial response was, "You can't have an abortion, that's wrong." And it was kind of a condemning answer that I gave her. But then fast forward a couple years later, God gave me another dream. And this time I was actually with a young woman, and we were at an abortion clinic. And it was myself and somebody else, another friend, and she was having the abortion. And the friend was in the room, and she said, "I don't believe in this," and stormed out. And I said, "I don't believe in this either, but I'm not leaving you alone right now." And I told her I would hold her hand through the curtain. And then fast forward, and the next dream, it was actually myself going through it. And it was so real in the detail. I could feel pain. In my head, I was laying on the bed and I was contemplating and saying, "I don't want to do this. I want to talk to the doctor one more time." And the doctor came in and everything was so fast that I didn't get that time to talk to him. And he left, and I said, "Well, if it didn't work, I don't want to try. I don't want to do it again." And so I wake up from these dreams that I'm like, "God, I don't know exactly what you're doing here. I don't know what you're asking of me." I felt a lot of grief. I woke up crying, and I reached out to somebody that God told me that I could talk to. And she said, "Audrey, I think that God is asking you to intercede and pray for these women all the way up until the actual act of abortion." And so I took it as God was growing my compassion to help women in that season. And just if you look at the first dream to the last dream, my first initial response was kind of like, "You can't do that. That's wrong," instead of meeting somebody in love and trying to meet them where they're at. So after that, I was able to volunteer at a pregnancy care center here locally, and I volunteered for a year, and I was able to be with women in all different avenues of like how they became pregnant. Some were married, some were not married. And then I got hooked up with Krista's ministry, and that's when we launched the Speak Life project. I first saw Krista's running video, I guess that was during the shutdowns after COVID. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know that she lived in my town. And it was actually a time that what she was saying was really hard for me to hear at the time, because I had just lost a lot of friends. And what she was saying was there could be like a distance between me and Jesus. And then I was like, "Well, I don't want to lose Jesus too. That sounds like too much." And so I just kind of forgot about the video, but it went viral. And I had no idea it went viral because I didn't know who she was. So a year later, my dad actually messaged me, and he was like, "Hey, you need to watch this Elijah Stream video. This woman lives in your town." And I was like, "Oh, weird," because I had just been thinking about this one video that I had watched a year ago. And I was like, that's weird. God just brought that video back to mind. So I watched it and I just felt this connection of I'm supposed to meet her and I don't know why. I didn't know anything about her ministry or anything about her story. During that time, I had just stopped volunteering at the Women's Care Center because of COVID. So I felt like I needed to meet Krista, and I wasn't sure why. We have some mutual friends that we're in prayer groups with. And so one friend ended up texting her, I believe, to say, hey, you need to meet Audrey. There's some similarities and you're calling. But during that time, I had already known that God was calling me to help women that were in the pre and post abortion cycle that needed to either talk about their options, their parenting options, or needed to talk to someone in an abortion recovery setting. We finally met at a friend's prayer worship, and I just walked up to Krista because, again, I didn't really know who she was. And I was like, hey, we need to talk and figure out like what it is and why God is wanting us to meet. And so she actually starts prophesying over my sister and I. And she says, you have a real ministry call on your life. And I was like, yeah, I do, because I knew that God was calling me into ministry, but I didn't know how to do it. And I had actually been prophesied over during other times that it would be a fast, rapid increase when God finally started the ministry, that it would be catalytic for other people, that they would see me stepping out into my ministry and that they would then step out into ministry themselves. So Krista's telling me, you have a real ministry call on your life. And I started sharing with her about the dreams that I had had, not knowing her history. And I'm telling her that I would want to name this ministry that I was going to start Beloved, or Be Loved. And she's on her phone and I'm thinking like, she hates the name. She's not even listening. And then she turns her phone around and she shows me her mission statement for a women's care center and the Speak Life platform. And it says Beloved and Be Loved 2 times. And I had said it 2 times. And so she was like, oh my gosh, look, the name you were going to use, it's actually like in my mission statement twice. And so that day was the day that she told me, she basically gave me a key to revival rooms to be able to have space to come meet with women. And after that, we started preparing to launch the Speak Life and the Shalom projects. I mentioned that I am a mother. I have 2 daughters and a son. My daughters are 8, and my son is 5, and we do not have twins. It's funny, growing up, I was always so fascinated with twins. I thought they were super cool. Anybody that was a twin, I just wanted to ask them all the questions, like the twin dynamic questions, like, do you know when your brother or sister is upset or whatever? My husband and I had actually gone through infertility, and there was a window of time that we were on a medicine that can cause you to have multiples. And so I remember saying, I feel like God's preparing us for something really big. Maybe we're going to have twins. And so we ended up adopting, and we have girls that are 5 months apart. So my husband and I always knew that we would have 2 kids and then adopt 2 kids. We weren't sure the order, but we thought, oh, well, we'll have a couple and then adopt a couple. When our plan didn't unfold the way we thought, we looked at the different agencies in our area, and we prayed about the different agencies and decided, based on kind of our gut feeling or Holy Spirit's leading, which agency we were going to go with. And then from there, we had to go to an adoption meeting where you find out the ins and outs of adoption in your state. The adoption agency that we went through, they actually allow the birth moms to decide. And so but I'll back up just a little bit. When when you're starting your adoption journey, you have to go through trainings and classes, and then you're also at the same time preparing your home study. And so a home study is when you have a social worker come in and they actually dig deep into your life, and they're looking at everything that you can think of. They're looking at your finances, your marriage life, asking very personal questions. They want to make sure that you're gonna be a good family for a baby or a child, and that, you know, you have a good solid marriage. Every state has their own adoption policies, and so we were actually in Tennessee at the time, but each state, they do their home study and the preparation for adoption a little bit different. When the birth mom is about 30 weeks, that's when she can start looking at profile books. And we had created a profile book that just told her a little bit about who we were, what we liked to do. It painted a picture of Lewis and I. And so when she hit that 30-week mark, she was able to look at a bunch of profiles, and then she would pick 5 that she would then sit and pray on and decide which family she connected with. The agency we went through, they do primarily open adoptions or semi-open. And at first, I'll be honest, the terms open adoption, I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know if I wanted that. It was kind of scary. But we believed the agency when they said that this is what is best for the kid, and we wanted what's best for our child. And so we prayed on it, and we just asked God to make this relationship with the birth mom whatever he wanted it to be. Open adoption can look like a lot of things. It's an umbrella word, and there's not a textbook meaning necessarily. Your adoption might look different than our adoption as far as openness. There are people that want very little contact, if any, and then there are families that have more contact. So all open adoption means is that you're able to reach out to her through the agency if you want to, and she's able to reach out to us through the agency if we want to. We decided to create a blind email where it's my daughter's email that one day when she's old enough, she has all of the history of all the emails that have gone back and forth between both birth mom and birth father and us. And we believe that that'll be really healthy for her to see, okay, I was loved by everybody. They all tried really hard to have a good relationship, and she'll get to see the history of all of that, where we were sending pictures and whatnot. With our agency, we were required for the first year to send updates each month, a monthly update with pictures about how our daughter was doing. And then after that, there was no requirement anymore. But one thing I want to say is that once you have adopted a child and it's legally done in the courts, we are legally her parents. So there's no risk of, well, one day, birth parents could come back and say, I want her back or whatever, because we're legally her parents. Actually, the judge said in the courtroom, she's yours as if you would have birthed her, and she will inherit everything that the rest of our kids will inherit. When our daughter came home, she was 14 days old, and I was 17 weeks pregnant. And so I was in my second trimester and feeling really great. I had all these bonding hormones going on. So I was bonding with the baby in front of me. And I honestly, it was hard to bond with the pregnancy during that time because there was a baby right in front of me that needed me. And so when I went into labor just 5 months later with our second daughter, I didn't want to do it. I was I just want to be at home with my daughter. She's only 5 months old. It was the first night that we had ever left her. And so for people that ask about the bond, I always tell them that for me, it was the exact same. I bonded really well with our daughter, and literally I held one baby that sat right on top of my belly. And so I had two babies growing together at the same time. The only thing that divided them was my skin. And so they would kick, and it was like they were kicking each other. And when our oldest daughter met her sister for the first time, she was 5.5 months old, and she just acted like she knew her. She was like reaching for her. And so I always called them my almost twins. People would ask, like, are they twins? And I would say no, but almost. They're closer than siblings in a lot of ways that would be like spaced out more.
Okay, so here we are 8 years later. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite?
No, I don't have a favorite. I think what has helped me the most is getting to know birth parents, because you're able to then see certain traits in families that I don't necessarily know. And so you're like, oh, wow, that's where she gets that from. Because we grow up with stories about like Aunt Susie did this or Grandpa, whatever. And you have those stories generationally. And when you don't know the birth parents, you just don't know. It's actually helped us to bond better with our daughter who's adopted. And so, yeah, and they fight. I mean, they're 8-year-old girls that, they get along. They're each other's best friends, but they also fight a lot too. We got matched with our birth mom with a phone call, and they told us you've been matched, but there still needed to be a match meeting made. And so even though we had been matched, we needed to then meet each other and make sure that we both felt comfortable with the match. And so we were able to then meet our daughter's birth mom and just, meet her in person, see if we thought it was a good fit, make sure she was comfortable with us, and then we went from there. When you go through the adoption process, you're asked all kinds of questions. So you're asked, would you be open to this type of child, or maybe a child that's special needs or has special medical needs? And so one of those questions that they ask is, do you have preference in like race or age or gender? And so we left that decision up to God. We were open to whatever he had planned. And so we didn't care about like race or gender. The agency we were going through, they do primarily infant adoptions. And so we knew it would be a baby. And we knew that we wanted to help be a solution for a birth mom who was in the deciding factor if she was going to parent, place the baby for adoption, or abortion. My husband and I both are very well bonded with our daughter, and she is very well bonded with us and her siblings. There's always going to be birth trauma, as we have found out in recent years that trauma can actually happen in utero too. But our birth mom did everything that she knew possible to make sure that the baby, even growing in her belly, felt loved and felt safe. She would read to her, she would sing to her. And so I think by her doing those things, it created space in Aria to be able to bond well in general with people. We did lots of like baby wearing, where I would strap a baby on the front and a baby on the back, because I had 2 small babies. And so, yeah, I think that helped with the bonding a lot. But we do realize that there's still trauma. I mean, if you're taken away from anything and everything you've ever known, even as an infant, like that's going to affect you. And so we're sensitive to that for her. And we work with our adoption counselors and work through things as we need to. I think that every Christian is called to help in either foster care or adoption in some way, whether it's to support families at your church with fundraising or to help babysit. But I do think that going through the adoption process and welcoming a child into your home, it probably is a calling from God, like to be able to welcome somebody else's child as your very own. I feel like that is like, it's a divine calling and intervention that he does. I know for myself, when we were in the adoption process, I started dreaming about a biracial baby girl. And so I feel like God was preparing me to welcome, a child of a different race. And in the dreams, one dream she was tiny and I would just hold her right up to my chest. And looking back, I know that God was showing me her. One dream, she was reaching up for me out of her crib and she was about 1 and she had fluffy, curly hair and it was totally her. So it was fun to see like little glimpses of the future, even though we were still waiting. So when we got the phone call that we were matched and it was a biracial baby girl, I was like, that's her. Like I knew that it was her. So I had been having dreams about this little biracial baby girl, and Lewis and I had been through, the home study and everything, and we just really needed to get away. We were kind of stressed. It had been almost probably like 6 months of just like grilling like questions and getting through all the paperwork. So we had planned a vacation to go to Seattle. We had air miles. We could fly there for free. And so we decided to do that. The week before we left to go to Seattle, I had a dream where I was getting the phone call and they were telling me, you've been matched with your baby and your baby girl is in Seattle. And I said, great, we're going to Seattle anyways. I'll just start my maternity leave then. And then the dream jumped and I was holding a baby that looked just like my husband. And I was really confused even in the dream because I was like, wait a minute, I've been dreaming about a biracial baby girl. And then I look up in the mirror and I can tell that I had like milk. And I was like, well, this is really strange. And so I wake up and I tell my husband, I'm like, well, I don't know what all that means, but we'll just see what happens if God does anything. And so in real life, we go on vacation and I'm like kind of in a dark place. I'm journaling and I'm like, maybe instead of worrying about becoming a parent, I need to just be seeking God and just spending time with him. And we're at lunch and Lewis is looking at his phone and he's like, Audrey, they're showing our profile book. And which was really surprising because we had only been waiting for like 60 days. And the average wait time is like 18 to 24 months at the time. But I always knew, like when we started our adoption process, I knew that it would be quick because I had this feeling that she was just already out there. And so we then had to wait. Like the birth mom took home 5 profile books over the weekend. And one of those 5 books would be who she would choose. And so we knew that she had our profile book, but we had to wait to figure out like if she had picked us or not. So we had just left Lake Quilnot in Seattle, Washington area, and we were driving through Olympic National Forest. And I always remember it as we were driving through Olympic National Forest. And my husband says we were at a 7-Eleven. And it was really both. Like, we were at a 7-Eleven, but it was in Olympic National Forest, and it was beautiful. And we got the match phone call where they said, hey, you've been matched with your baby. And congratulations, you're your mom. And so we literally called everybody we knew, like, for 3 hours driving back to Seattle. I think we were on the phone the entire time because we had so many people that had supported us and helped us fundraise, and we just wanted to like include them. So from that point, I remember getting on the airplane to fly home, and I was praying for our safety. And it was like, well, now I'm a mom. I have to pray for my safety. There's a baby that needs me, you know? And so we get home and we schedule the match meeting with our birth mom. And I realized that I'm late. But I was like, there's no way. There's like no way I'm pregnant. It's not uncommon for me to have an irregular cycle. And so I just go about my business. I'm like, it's just my nerves. It's just because I'm nervous about meeting her. That would be totally normal, right? So we meet her the next week, and then 2 weeks later, I have a dream where I have a stethoscope and I'm holding it to my belly and I hear a heartbeat. And so I share this dream with my best friend from high school, and she says, Audrey, you have to take a test. And I was like, no, I don't want to. Like, I'm scared. What does that mean if I'm pregnant? And so I take a test, and sure enough, it was like positive right away. And my first response was fear. I was scared that the birth mom would change her mind about us. And we had worked so hard to fundraise. God had provided $20,000 in like 7 months. And we had a baby that was due in 8 weeks. But I was also scared that we would lose both. Like, we would lose our daughter that we were going to adopt, and that we would lose the pregnancy, because I had never been pregnant and we had been trying to conceive. And so, yeah, there was a lot of fears with that. We had talked to our adoption counselor when I was about probably 10 weeks and told her that I was pregnant. And she was bound by confidentiality, that she couldn't share my information. But she highly suggested that if we wanted a healthy, open adoption that was built on trust, that we needed to tell her. And so we called for another meeting. And knowing our birth mom now, because we are pretty close, she was actually really nervous that we were changing our mind. So we met with her, and I had written her a letter, and I couldn't read it because I had pregnant hormones, and so I had my adoption counselor read it. But it was my heart out on the table that said, like, we love this baby. If you still choose us, she will be our firstborn. She'll always be our first child, and we're excited, to still continue, but we did want you to know that we're pregnant. And so her response was the best response that she could have had. She said excitedly, I am so happy that you get to experience this, because she was like big pregnant. And I was like, wow, like that was just really special for her to say that. God equips us in many ways, and maybe even differently depending on what you need. Like, my personality is different than the next person's personality, but I believe that God equips you with love and compassion, but I also believe that he gives us revelation of our own adoption into the kingdom. And so knowing that we're actually adopted into God's family, and that he actually sent his own son on the cross to die for us so that we could be a part of that family, shows me that we don't have to all come from the same DNA. So I think God equipped my husband and I to be adoptive parents by revealing to us the Father's love that he has for us, even though we're adopted ourselves into the kingdom of God. When we believe that we're adopted into God's family and we actually live that out, that there's an impartation that can happen where the Holy Spirit then fills in the blanks that we don't have, and where we're able to have the same love and compassion that God has for us, for other people around us, specifically adopted children. I feel like God has really convicted me over the years to not just be somebody who wants to say, I'm pro-life, let's save the babies, but to actually take action on that. And that can look like a lot of things. It can look like, if you feel like you have a place in your heart to adopt a baby, to be a good option for women who are in an unexpected pregnancy. It can also look like supporting a single mom. It can look like babysitting, meals. If we didn't have our daughter, our life would be really, my second daughter wouldn't have her best friend. We would have had a big, one daughter, and then 3 years later, a son. And so we'd have just 2 children. I believe that my husband and I would be different. I believe that when we went through the adoption process, God grew us in ways that we didn't even realize that we needed growth. I just think that our life wouldn't be as full. It also wouldn't be as calm, because if you've ever met our daughter, she brings a calmness about her. She can have the craziest dog meet her energy, and everybody just calms around her. I believe that God has big plans for her future. So if her birth mom wouldn't have chosen life, I believe that her generations, her bloodline would have missed a world of difference, and we would have missed it too. If you're a woman that's in an unexpected pregnancy, you are already a parent, and you have 3 parenting options. You have the option to parent as a parenting option. You have the option to place a baby for adoption and maybe walk out this beautiful open adoption with your child, where you're still able to see and love her or him. And you also have the option of abortion. It's a real option in our world. And so if you have questions or want to talk about those options, you can email us at speaklife@christaalicia.com.